Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. Just a few things to get through. Basically, it's two bits that I heard on Sky News. I know if I start watching that, then I won't have so many of these to do, but I think it's important to analyse how information is disseminated to us, and how it's twisted, and how, despite media often saying that they don't have an agenda and they're neutral. I mean, obviously, I'm from Sky News here, which don't necessarily have to be as neutral, say, as the BBC, because they're meant to be a government broadcaster, but still they have their agendas. It's just we all agree on those agendas, i.e., how Russia and China are always vilified, and how America is always, as a hero and a friend. The same as in movies, the white hat and the black hats. It's that kind of thing, and that's considered okay, and it's not considered having an agenda. It's not considered as being biased. We're allowed to have those historical traits of how we see other countries based on historical things and not based on actual current events. So we're allowed to paint them with that same brush. So, also, before I do that, first, obviously Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the UK, is now in intensive care, and I'd been saying to my wife that obviously statistically, with all the people that are dying, especially people who are of older age and those with underlying health conditions, and usually they are people of older age because we get these conditions as we get older, I was expecting either celebrities or and political leaders to succumb to this disease as well, because most of the leaders of our world, I don't know why, because if it was up to us, I'm sure we wouldn't choose these people, these old people to lead us. Most of them, if not all of them, are very old. I mean, obviously Boris Johnson's only 55, but I think isn't Donald Trump, he's in his 60s. Lots of these ones. Obviously France is young as well, but they tend to be of the over 40, 50 age. So I was expecting one of them at least to succumb to this. So Boris is that one at the moment. Or this is just some agenda to make us fall into line because they're having trouble with, well, the media is making out they're having trouble with people flouting the lockdown by going to the park and sunbathing. Anyway, but there's other people that are saying, like if you saw on Facebook, that the peak already happened and before the shutdown was even put into place. I don't really understand that, but I guess it's they're trying to say that because it has a 2 weeks latency period, that it's possible that all the people who have had it already do have it, and that this exercise is actually one that doesn't really do anything other than keep us in line and following the government and creating trust issues, trying to rebuild them, which may be the case because one of the, obviously H1N1, that in 2009 swine flu, we didn't do this lockdown. Everything was normal, and 50 million people worldwide, according to the CDC, died. So, and also there's a Sky News I'm going to bring in a minute about Sweden, who are not doing the lockdown as severe as we are. Anyway, I'll get to that in a minute. So first, what was the other thing I was going to talk about? Boris Johnson. Oh, the figures also. The figures yesterday in the UK, which was the 6th of April 2020, they were down to 400 and something. Previous days they've been between 600 and 700. I'm surprised with that fluctuation because looking at other world countries, and that's what I was talking about the other day, is the numbers seem to be, fairly similar. So I'm wondering whether they've cooked the books a little bit so that today on the 7th there's going to be a big 900 or something like that. And obviously if that happens, it may not, maybe we've already plateaued and it's going to come down now. But if we do get that big number in the next few days, then any sane person is going to look at those figures and say, well, that is because they borrowed off those ones, because if you add them all up, they would get a mean average of say 600. And there you can see that that's probably because that figure was not properly reported, or because Sky News were trying to make out that UK's changed its statistics, the way it's going to do them. They're saying Scotland is doing that as well. Why are they doing that in the middle of this? They complained when China did this. The problem is that if they change the way they're going to do the statistics, the UK already shifted to a 24-hour back. So if they're going to do things like that, it's going to make the statistics not mean anything. If you start to add a different way that you're going to count deaths, or what you're going to do, or how you're going to do it, is going to mean that you have to start again. Then don't show us those old figures, because that graph won't make any sense because you've changed it. Most people won't think about that. I don't know. It's just crazy. It's just like that. I don't know why you would change the way you're going to do the statistics. The only way you'd be doing that is if you particularly want to create a picture. That's the only reason you would do that. So let's see what picture they're going to create. So on to Sky News. This one, I've been noticing Sky News have been doing these pieces, and I don't think news programmes should do them, is where they're adding music over the top to create emotional effect, and that's the only reason why it's done. And I don't really think news programmes should be doing it. I understand why, because it makes something more entertaining, but this is a serious matter that's still going on, and they're sticking music, sad music over the bottom to create that emotion, and I don't think that's necessary. So that's one thing I've noticed that they've been doing a lot of. The other thing is with this Sky News, how they vilify certain countries like China and Russia. We all know that that's how it goes. It's because they're communist. That seems to be the only real thing. It's to do with their money and their political ways. If they were, I don't know if there's other countries that are vilified that aren't communist, but it does seem to be that bracket is the problem that America and Britain and the West have. So anyway, yeah, we're seeing this news broadcast. It's not actually so much the presenter, it's more the guest that they got, but you've got to remember that they purposely pick the people they're going to talk to. They know the agendas of the people. So even though you could say Sky News aren't doing this, they are, because they picked this person to talk to. They know his view on China. They know he's going to slag them off. But this is always the way it happens. You see President Trump called it the China virus, or it was the China virus, wasn't it? Rather than COVID-19. So, yeah, and then afterwards, how they hero worship the Queen. They say about her involvement in the war. Her involvement in the war was sitting behind a table reading a speech. She didn't go out on the fields and go and have to risk her life and suffer with having to kill people. So it's a bit much to sort of try and make out that she was a soldier. Her part in the war was speaking. But you see how the words are used, the preambles are used to create heroes and villains, to put it in the Beach Boys song. Anyway, here you go. I'll play it for you now.
Stress off my mind. I would have thought 2020 would have turned out to be such a year. But I guess that if anything, it's shown how we come together as a community and how Britain is working together to get through this.
When this is over, I think the legacy of this whole coronavirus will be how we all came together as a community. Lockdown is keeping us apart from each other, and it is creating some distance, but it's not going to break up our community. It's only, I think, making us stronger.
Well, some breaking news just in. This is from Britain's construction sector. The PMI indexes, which measure activity, have recorded the sharpest fall in activity since the financial crisis in 2009. That's month on month. So activity in the construction sector down by more than for the past decade. Probably not a surprise there, but distressing nonetheless. Well, today the Foreign Affairs Select Committee has released a new report calling for the establishment of a G20 for public health. The chair of that committee, the Conservative MP Tom Tugendhat, joins me now. Tom Tugendhat, thank you very much indeed for being with us. What are you calling for?
Well, it's very good to be with you, Adam. And what we're calling for is for a committee similar to the G20, but for public health of countries that are willing to be open and transparent. We've had huge problems with the reliability of data out of certain countries, particularly China, in recent weeks and months. And we think that there is a role for international cooperation that we're not seeing at the moment. And we'd like to deepen that and make sure that it's an enduring basis so that actually it works.
We do, of course, have the World Health Organization, the WHO. Are you saying that they simply haven't been able to get on top of this?
Well, we've seen various examples of issues with that. First of all, denying the existence of Taiwan, the only state that has managed to identify and close down the Chinese travelers out of Wuhan very early on, so that it's had only a few hundred cases and only very few deaths. And we've seen it repeating Chinese misinformation that if it didn't know to be untrue, then frankly it wasn't doing its job. So there are some real issues with the World Health Organization as it currently stands, and partly that's due to the structure of the organization. It depends for about 10%, so I think it's 12% of its funding on the People's Republic of China, and that has led it to be very slow to criticize its paymasters.
You are very critical of China. Do you have any sign that they might be prepared to participate in this better global health cooperation in future?
I'm not sure why they'd be invited.
Well, it wouldn't be much use if they weren't, would it?
Well, if they're going to lie and give false information, then surely it's better only to get accurate information from countries that are open and transparent. Then at least we can proceed on real information rather than being fed misinformation, which is actually worse than nothing. It's actively harmful as opposed to merely neutral.
The other country that's a problem in all this is Donald Trump's America. They're one of the reasons why the World Health Organization is so dependent on Chinese funding is the United States has not fulfilled its obligations to the WHO for the past couple of years. Do you think there's any chance, would you want America, so long as it's led by Donald Trump, to participate in this group?
Well, the United States shares information openly and honestly. Whether or not its political leaders react and how they react to various...
You see how the difference there, despite having the same problem, he can differentiate between the two countries and have a good country and a bad country. Obviously, being British, he's not going to slag off America no matter what Donald Trump says or how he acts. And he's going to differentiate also between Donald Trump as an American and America. Whereas he won't differentiate between China. He'll see China as every Chinese person is like this, despite it being maybe a few people within the government like Donald Trump that may be having this problem. The China has a problem with the West because of the past, and that's why they act in the way they act, isn't it? Isn't that part of it? And isn't that what the system wants anyway, for everyone to be divided? That's why we gave countries names. That's why we have different identities and cultures, so that we all can fight each other and have division against each other and forget that we're actually all human beings. But it's interesting to see how the Sky News reporter is showing that both countries have a problem, but he won't attack America, obviously. He'll just maybe attack Donald Trump a little bit and say that, oh well, that he doesn't count for all Americans. And to think that America never lie or hide secrets, and we don't do that either. And we only tell the truth. All political parties have that problem with how they disseminate information and what they can and can't tell the public. They all have that. They all have that issue. And we find that out in time. Maybe China are a bit more attackive on it and more obvious on it, whereas we, in Britain especially, we like to hide behind our smiles like Tony Blair.
Issues is really a matter for them. But there's no question that American scientists are locked up as Chinese scientists are. They're not. Whether or not its political leaders react and how they react to various issues is really a matter for them. But there's no question that American scientists are sharing honestly. They're not being arrested or locked up as Chinese scientists are. They're not being forced to recant in a sort of Soviet show trial way as Chinese scientists are. You know, the comparison, I'm afraid, is laughable. I mean, America is an open democracy. You may or may not like its leadership, but it is an open democracy and its people have freedom.
Except when it comes to being Julian Assange, who, just because he released the secrets about the horrible, illegal things that America did in that illegal war, he's not free to speak, is he?
Speech.
Well, with all due respect, at news conferences, we've had Donald Trump shutting down medical experts. And he's currently championing chloroquine or hydrochloroquine as a cure when the scientific evidence is certainly not backing that. I mean, he's just as unreliable as the Chinese, isn't he?
Well, but that's the question about the US leadership. Name me one US scientist who's been arrested.
Well, okay, and you have evidence in China of scientists being arrested, do you?
Yes, multiple. Dr. Li, who was the first doctor who was reporting on Wuhan's COVID outbreak, was forced to recant before he died. There are various other scientists who've disappeared. There's multiple reporting about this. The Washington Post and New York Times and South China Morning Post have reported on it very actively.
So he's getting his information from American newspapers who have an agenda. He hasn't gone and searched this out himself, has he? I could give a list of names of people and then you're just going to take my word for it just because I am a journalist with an agenda?
And indeed some of your correspondents have as well. The problem leaders make the right or the wrong decision. I'm afraid that's going to happen, you know, at different times in different countries all over the place. That's not something that we should hold countries liable for. What we should hold countries liable for is a deliberate attempt to mislead and to twist the truth in order to achieve political gain. Now, we've seen in the last 3 months what we've known for many.
So we're meant to forget about how Britain got America into the Second World War. It was at the sinking of the, I'm not sure if it was the Lusitania, but I know it was the sinking of a ship that they faked, that they actually shot down and made out it was the Germans to get the Americans into the war because they didn't want to be in it. So for political reasons. And also, what about the illegal war in Iraq? The manipulation of UN sanctions by America and Britain making up fake stories of the weapons that have never been found that Saddam Hussein was meant to have had so that we could invade that country for their oil. Of course, they don't count, do they? Because they were the good guys.
What we should hold countries liable for is a deliberate attempt to mislead and to twist the truth in order to achieve political gain. Now, we've seen in the last 3 months what we've known for many, many years, that the survival of the Communist Party of China is the only thing that matters to the Communist Party of China at any price, including its own people, and definitely including all of us.
Are you one of those who blames China for this pandemic?
No, I'm not blaming them for the pandemic, in the sense I'm not blaming them for the root cause. I don't know what the root cause is. What I'm blaming them for is the failure to act when it was quite clear that they had all the warnings around, before Chinese New Year, before early January, and knew very well because their scientists were telling them what was happening. And what I then blame the World Health Organization for is not listening to Taiwan, a state that had at that point already realized what was going on and had warned the World Health Organization. And if you read Lawrence Friedman's article in the New Statesman, it sets out very clearly the timeline on this. And then ignoring them, but instead repeating Chinese propaganda designed to promote the idea of the invincible Chinese Communist Party and the genius of the communist dictators, and instead actually sacrificing people of the UK and America and France and Italy and indeed people of China to what is effectively a propaganda arm of a one-party state. And I think that's a tragedy and being lived out because of political failure.
The Chinese were at one point barring foreigners from coming in on flights to China, but still permitting flights out, including by Chinese citizens. Do you have any explanation for that?
Yes, it's propaganda. It's a way of blaming a foreigner when in fact the cause is internal.
What are your thoughts for Boris Johnson this morning? Should he try and carry on as our executive leader, or should he actually take a break to get better?
Well, all my thoughts and prayers are with everybody who's suffering this disease. But of course, those I know best, and people like Boris Johnson, who I have a lot of time for, have very much extra thoughts as well. And all the staff who are looking after him. We need to make sure that they all have the resources they need. Now, luckily, we live in a cabinet system, so the cabinet government will continue, and we have a fantastic health secretary in Matt Hancock who's doing an amazing job, and I'm delighted he's recovered and is so full of energy. I must say he's more full of energy after COVID than many of us are before. And we have an excellent chancellor who's doing an amazing job in trying to keep the economy going and preparing for the future in Rishi Sunak. So I'm delighted that we have a strong cabinet government taking us forward, and I look forward to that continuing.
Oh, but given that, wouldn't it be for the best if Mr. Johnson himself took a break to get better?
Well, effectively he has. Dominic Raab, as First Secretary of State, is sitting in as in the cabinet today, and will no doubt do so until the Prime Minister returns.
Thank you very much indeed, Tom Tugendhat, Conservative MP, joining me there, and Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Well, Her Majesty the Queen gave a rare address to the nation last night, thanking NHS staff, carers and other essential workers on the front line in the fight against coronavirus. She drew on her own experiences in the war as an example of how the crisis could be endured, even alluding to the famous wartime song with the phrase, "We'll meet again."
While we have faced challenges before, this one is different. This time we join with all nations across the globe in a common endeavor, using the great advances of science and our instinctive compassion to heal. We will succeed, and that success will belong to every one of us. We should take comfort that while we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again. But for now, I send my thanks and warmest good wishes to you all.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up.
Wow. It won't be much good for the homeless people, the people that don't have the big castles to live in, will it? Oops, I accidentally deleted the one I was going to play next. Right, so the next one I'm going to play, if I can find where I deleted it from. Where is it? Right, this one is about sort of trying to mislead the way the media, when it gets onto an angle of a story. So Adam Bolton here, his angle was, the rest of the world's in lockdown, but Sweden aren't in lockdown. And they got some video that they show of people congregating. Now, of course, these people congregating, it doesn't put the time up of when this video was taken, because we know that yesterday when they were talking about Debenhams collapse, they showed lots of people walking past Debenhams because they used stock footage, old footage, and they didn't put the date on there. But if anyone's seen that, they could say, "Oh, look, there's loads of people walking around Debenhams." But no, it's because it's stock footage. And this is how the media works. They don't always use footage of the day for obvious reasons, so they don't want to have to go out and take a shot of an empty Debenhams, which is closed because of the outbreak. But yeah, so they show this of Sweden, and he comes off for this agenda that he wants to sort of say, oh look, why are you doing that but the rest of the world is in lockdown? But then the guy from, luckily he decides to speak up and says, no, that's not actually how it is. But you see how they try to manipulate how things are so that you have this a certain view. Let's play it. Too far.
Lockdown, millions of residents are adapting to a temporary new way of life, but it seems to be pretty much business as usual in Sweden. The country has resisted implementing the same stringent measures as its neighbours, even though 300 residents have died from the disease and almost 5,500 people have contracted it. Well, joining me now is Professor Jan Albert of Infectious Disease Control at the Karolinska Institute. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Professor Albert. Can you tell us, first of all, how normal is life in Sweden today compared to before the virus?
It's quite different, and to say that we do not have lockdown is not really true. But it's not enforced in the same way by law as it is in many other countries. But we are instructed very seriously by the Public Health Institute to be careful about both contracting the coronavirus and spreading it onwards. So many offices work from home.
We are seeing a lot of people walking around behind you. As I understand it, shops and bars are still open. And of course, the fear in other countries has been that that's been sources of contagion.
Yeah, so there are some differences, definitely, but people are not living normal lives. And many of the restaurants and also the shops are experiencing really low business. And we do see the same type of effect on the economy as you do in the UK and many other European countries.
Do you think that possibly in 2 weeks' time or so that Sweden will be in line with the UK or France or Italy or Germany?
I wouldn't say. I don't think it will be exactly the same. There may be some ramp up of the prevention activities, but probably not to the same extent as in many other countries. And the underlying reason is that the scientific evidence for what's sort of right or wrong in this is not there. So everyone is doing guesswork.
Yeah, that's certainly true, but most other countries, if you like, have bowed to the international consensus. What is it that has persuaded Sweden that this is not necessary?
Well, I think it's in part that we have, since very long, the government is relying very heavily on their expert institutions like the Public Health Institute, and they are really well trained in these types of decisions. Many actually of the heads of epidemiology at the Swedish Public Health Institute were trained in the UK because the UK has very good tradition in infectious disease control and research on transmission and things like that.
And we've had an argument in this country about the way of dealing with this. There was an attempt to talk about something called herd immunity, and then that was abandoned. In terms of dealing with this outbreak, what is the intention of the people advising the Swedish government? Do they just simply say it doesn't matter if everyone gets it, or are you trying to limit the extent of contagion?
I think there is a misconception in many places that this will be in some way contained without herd immunity. Unless we have a vaccine, which is at least a year or two away, herd immunity is the only way to really sort of defeat the disease. The issue is whether you think that if you push cases forward in time, you will have a better situation when it comes to healthcare, But eventually, everyone will, or a large proportion of any country's population will have this disease, unless we have a vaccine.
You're the expert, I'm not, but as I understand it, with herd immunity, there's also this argument about mortality rates. That if you simply go for spreading in the community, you're undoubtedly going to end up with a higher level of mortality than you would if you attempted to stop contagion.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the reason why also the Swedish strategy is to flatten the curve and to delay or to prevent having cases at the same time. But there's no by pushing cases forward in time, they will still be vulnerable to infection when a lockdown is released. So it's more finding the correct balance here with a lockdown that has in effect. We have very strong protection activities.
Professor Albert, thank you very much indeed. Much more coming up in the next hour.
And this is what always happens. Whenever they get to something that they don't really want to talk about, it's, oh, we've run out of time now. That was, he had 4 more minutes till the hour. Maybe he wants to put 3 minutes adverts, I don't know, but you do tend to find, suspiciously, I don't know if it's true or not, that when, well, I've noticed when there's some part that they don't like, I don't know if the producer's shouting in their ear, okay, cut him off now, put the adverts on. Obviously he's not going to put the adverts on, but he's going to say, oh, now the adverts, and then they cue them in. But an interesting argument there, which is the argument that was used with H1N1, I always get it wrong, swine flu, which was that everything continued as normal. And like I've seen on some other stats suggesting that all the people that have been exposed to it have already been exposed to it, and sitting at home for 2 weeks actually isn't actually doing anything because the people have already been exposed. But then of course the thing is that the idea with herd immunity is the connection with the deaths. The deaths may not also just be because of, you know, you're letting everyone catch it, but also because the healthcare can't cope. And especially like our NHS, is, if you've ever been into a hospital here, you'll know how dirty and how, well, some of them are. Maybe the London one's a bit better, but, you know, they're not usually that clean. They're not usually that advanced, despite coming from an advanced country. And there's no fault of the people that work there. It's to do with the lack of money that's been put into it. And then the amount of, well, too many managers, but that's the case with all businesses. Too many managers, not enough workers. But yeah, it was interesting what he said about the idea that even if we are in lockdown, there is this herd immunity, which is going to happen because we'll find out actually. We'll see how Sweden did. At that time, it was 2 days ago, and there was it 300 deaths, 5,000 cases. We'll see how it goes with them. And then we'll see how it does with us all locking down. I don't know if the proportions are the same country-wise, population, I mean. So, yeah, this may not actually work, this shutdown. It may be more of the importance of the government is to scare people, which we know that the news and the governments like to do, especially the media. And the reason for this may be because, like I said before, vaccines have been coming down, less people have been trusting them, less people trust their governments, there's more heckling, there's more you know, people standing up for their rights. You know, that what happened with Brexit, you could say what happened with Donald Trump, a celebrity getting inside the White House because of his views. So there's an attack against the authority of the system. I think you also look on YouTube, the Truth of the Movement, you know, that it's gaining traction. So I think maybe this was used as an excuse to be able to rebuild that, to get people to trust, because through trust you have to go through fear. Like, you know, a child who's scared of walking down the stairs holding the banister, you know, you want to give that banister to them so that they feel trust, and then they can walk that down the stairs. If it's not there, you know, if you scare them, you know, then or you hold them and walk them down the stairs, you're with them, they'll be more safer. So I think this is an exercise in that. whether this event, how true it is, what's really causing, whether it's 5G, whether it's someone created this through putting bats into fear and putting them next to people and letting them expose them to this cross transmission of this disease, whether it was done by nature, it just happened, whether it's done because of the economic situation that we're living in, which is maybe more realistic, that people put bats in cages or whatever. I don't know why they were like that, but whatever the reason was, maybe they've used this opportunity because H1N1, 50 million people according to CDC died worldwide. This is probably going to be, is it going to be as many or less? There wasn't this big lockdown then, so it's not like science has changed, unless they're more caring now, or because of that, that's why they changed. But maybe this is going to be important. I think that people now will be a lot more trusting of their politicians, of their media. They'd be thankful to be alive and they won't argue so much. And maybe they'll fall into line. Everyone, I suspect, when they've been talking recently about vaccinations dropping down and having to force people to vaccinate, I suspect that'll all be gone. Even people who are anti-vaxxers will now change their mind, especially when this new one comes in. But if it's 2 years down the line, it won't. I suspect it's going to be in September. They'll make some breakthrough, or they'll use some drug we've already been given to get us back on it, even if it doesn't really work, even if we've all already got it. If the antigens or antibody tests prove that most of us have got it, we'll still all take it just to create that illusion of science and the importance of these things and trust. So the important thing is after all this, we don't know what caused this, what's true or not. We're not at the place where we can investigate it. We have to take our sources from YouTube and the media and whatever and try and make up our own decision. But the important thing is how we act afterwards. That we make sure that we get our rights back. And our rights, the true rights, not the rights that we believe that are rights, that the system has generated, this idea of, our rights as human beings to be alive in this place, that we don't know what is, where, why we're here, all that kind of stuff, back from the beginning. Our rights as human beings is we're all human beings, and we're living on this place that was given to us for free. We don't even know. It's no one's. We should all have a part of it. That is the rights that we should be fighting for, that we're all free to live a happy and safe and similar life. Not that there's injustices between celebrities and famous people and rich people and the forefathers of the rich, that only they get to live in castles, that everyone should live in a castle or everyone should live in a house. There should be no differentiation between human beings. We should all be able to eat enough, because there is enough for everyone to eat on this planet. We should all not suffer. We shouldn't have to have money to force us to work, to manufacture unnecessary amounts of things. This is what we've learned through this. The fact that we don't need 500 different toilet rolls. One toilet roll will do. We survived, didn't we? We took what was there. So we need to think about that. Wasting our time having different companies compete to make all these different products. Unnecessary. Let's put our endeavours into human suffering. And those sufferings are medical things. Pharmaceutical companies, not like the ones that are trying to push out medicines that don't work. Medicines that do work for the many. Medicines that are free. Food that is free, because everything around us that is taken from those things was free in the first place. Why have we put a charge on it? That is the right that we need to remember after this. We've seen an example how we can live, how we can support homeless people. We're giving them hotels, we're giving them car parking spaces, and we're caring about them now. We're giving people money when they're sitting at home not doing anything. Because we realise we can do anything under a pandemic. Well, we can do anything every day. We can choose how we all live as a people, as human beings. We don't have to live this segregated, separate life where we have these false identities of colour, of culture, of birthright, of history. past is an illusion that's created so that you can create a particular future. Forget about that way of looking at life. Look at life from this day and the next. And that everyone shouldn't suffer and everyone should be truly equal. And it's not an impossible dream. It's not something that isn't achievable. It is, and it is only if we all really want it. And then we can create a world in our own image of the way we want it to be. Take care, take it easy. God bless and peace. Oh, I forgot to mention. 351, Pursuit of Truth. It got removed. First video I've ever had removed of the Pursuit of Truth after 350 of them because of the 5G thing that I put at the end, which I believe is a man who used to work, it's claimed, used to work in Vodafone, and he's giving his view on 5G and its effects. I've tried to put it on again by speeding it up. I don't know if it's going to get removed. If it gets removed again, I'll just have to put my preamble, and if anyone wants it, I can send it to them. So you can just put it in the comments if you want it. But I don't know if it's going to be removed again or not. But they're coming down hard on this 5G and coronavirus COVID-19 thing, which is, I've never seen that before on my videos. I know other people have had that problem with lots of their videos. So that's interesting that that's happening, that there is censorship. Well, obviously there's censorship on YouTube because it's a system thing, isn't it? It's an old way thing. If I'm not saying that I believe in it. My preamble says there's questions that I have about it that doesn't make sense to me. But I thought that, whether I believe it or not is interesting, and that other people should be able to make up their own mind, that they shouldn't be worried by something that is against the system or is against what they believe to be true or not. You should be able to make your own mind up, because that's the free people we're meant to be. And that's what I've appealed against them. I'm sure it will fail. But we live in a free society where our human right, not any law, not any passage in the Bible or Quran, it is our human right to be free. Because no one here knows how we came about. No one knows why we're here. And no one has the ability to chain us like this. We are free. We should be free. And so for someone to tell us, oh, you can't listen to that because of what? Because you may believe it. Well, that's your own choice. That's like these stupid people that, the Christians or the Muslims, especially more maybe the Muslims, who won't go to a church, or a Christian that won't go to a mosque because they believe that they're going to get contaminated, or they won't read a Bible or a Quran because they believe they're going to get contaminated by reading it. My goodness, open your fucking mind. I'm not talking about them, I'm talking to YouTube. Just because governments are getting worried about this thing, and they're getting, it is the freedom of people to make their own mind up. We're not in 1984, we're not in Orwellian time. Or maybe we are. Maybe this is the beginning of it. But that's definitely not the way it should be. Take care, take it easy. God bless and peace.